a lot of exciting things happening at Charleston Southern University, including new facilities and new programs. Today, I talked with the president of Charleston Southern University, Dr. Dondi Costin, for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Dr. Dondi Costin, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thanks, Quintin. It's always great to see you.
I appreciate it greatly. You are the president of Charleston Southern University and have been for a couple of years now. As we sit here right now, Dr. Costin, what's new, what's now at Charleston Southern University?
Quintin, we are, like most of the rest of the country, we're very excited that it looks like the pandemic is on the way out. I don't know if we're all the way there yet, but for the last 6 weeks or so here, it has seemed more normal than it has seemed since before the pandemic. So we're very excited about that. As I've been here, believe it or not, Quintin, I've been here almost 4 years. And so the time sure flies. And a few months ago, I crossed a threshold. And that threshold was that, again, this was probably November, December, that since then, I've had more time during COVID than I had before COVID. And so that just gives a little bit of perspective about what's been happening here on campus. We've been very excited. Our enrollment has done very well, far better than average. In fact, this last fall semester, we had I think our 5th highest enrollment of new students in the university's history. So much so that we had to start putting, we put about 100 students into the hotel that we own on campus. So they had the nicest rooms on campus, and we're very excited for that. A number of other things have happened. Back in December, we graduated for the first time in the university's history. We graduated our first doctoral students, a cohort of about 24 who graduated with a Doctor of Education in Leadership. And we're excited about this program, Quintin, because each cohort is made up of 22. We had a couple of fast burners who graduated early, but each cohort is made up of 22 students, mostly adult learners, and on purpose, we designed the cohorts so that about 2/3 of the cohort are educators and administrators locally, and about 1/3 are business and other leaders who want to advance their careers, and so makes for a really good mix. We started an engineering program, and so now, and we've constructed the most of a building for our engineering program, and you can major now at Charleston Southern in mechanical engineering, computer engineering, or electrical engineering. That's happened since the pandemic. We, as we may have talked about one other time, we started a chaplaincy center. That's Rob Dewey, who will be known to many of your viewers, Chaplain Rob Dewey. And we've named that center after him because of his not only his great career, but his philanthropy ensures that his kind of chaplaincy will be extended well into the future. We start our Doctor of Physical Therapy program. The first cohort of 48 students show up next month, believe it or not. And so this has been a long time coming. But at the end of May, the last day of May, the first group of 48 students show up. So we're very excited about that. You probably also know that, again, this year is the first year that we have officially an aeronautics program.
Yes.
And so Charleston Southern is the only 4-year collegiate aviation program in the state of South Carolina. We thought we'd have 8, maybe 10 students this first year. We had to cap enrollment at 30. And this next fall, we already have 30 who have registered their attendance, and another 30 on the waiting list. So we're very excited about that. Just goes to show that Charleston Southern has always been a place where we try to meet the needs of our community. When we decide what new academic programs are going to be offered, we do so based on what the community needs, what the state needs, what the world needs, quite frankly. So, we've tried to adopt the March Madness mantra, Quintin, of survive and advance during the pandemic. So we've done that and been very excited. I will say also, for the past 2 years. I think we had gone maybe 4 or 5 years without a conference championship, Big South Conference championship in any kind of sport. But for the past 2 years, both our cross country team and our men's cross country team and our women's tennis team have won both regular season and conference championships. So back to back. So all kinds of things going on, Quintin, not to mention some building and other projects that we got going on, including a brand new intramural field complex that should be finished here by the end of the summer, and I think will be probably the most, probably the nicest in the state. So when all this gets a little bit better, we'd love to have you come take a look at that sometime. We can talk about student life sometime, Quintin.
Well, I'm always on the campus. It's my favorite university in the city. But let me ask you, what does the city, what does the state, and what does the world need right now from Charleston Southern University?
Yeah, I think the main thing that the world state community needs is graduates from universities who know how to think clearly, who know how to solve problems, who communicate well, who write well, who think well, and who are men and women of character. And so that's really, we are as you know, Quintin, we're a Christian university, and we're based on from a biblical worldview. Now, as we've said, you and I have talked about before, we're a Christian university, but not a university just for Christians, which means that any student of any background can come here and be certain that their professor will care for them, will love them, will hold them to very high standards, but will equip them for what's coming next. And so I think, broadly speaking, what we need today are students who come from this liberal arts core of education, but based in a biblical worldview, so that when students graduate, they can understand compassion and competence and character, all the things that any employer would need. And so I think that's what we do best. And, we're always on the lookout for what is our next academic program. As we grow and expand the university, we do so in ways that are systematic, that really meet the needs of the community.
What meets the needs of the community with your expansion?
Yeah, as one of the things that we have done quite, in the last number of years is we have asked that very question. And anytime that we decide on a new academic program, of course, like any other university, we do kind of a market study, what kinds of programs are necessary. We don't want to just do something that nobody's interested in. But we, every couple of years or so, the Charleston Regional Development Alliance, CRDA, and the Metro Chamber of Commerce, probably all the chambers of commerce, frankly, get together and do what they call a talent demand study. And what this talent demand study does is evaluates that very question. What are the majors? What are the skill sets needed to go forward? So that's why Charleston Southern was one of the first 14 in the entire country to be accredited in our cybersecurity program by ABET, which is the premier engineering and technology accrediting agency for colleges in the country. That's why we started engineering. That's why we looked at aeronautics. Here we are with Boeing in our background. And if you've ever taken a look at the gap between the demand for pilots globally and the supply, there's no way we're ever going to catch up, at this rate. And so, we just try to do consistent with our mission, with the resources we have available, or those that we can attract to invest in these new programs. We try to do that to meet the needs of the community. Because, let's face it, if we don't meet the needs of the community, then the program that we have just started, by definition, is unnecessary. And what we try to do is not start unnecessary programs.
And as I drop my hat here, let me ask you, what is the pace of growth right now with that particular program?
Yeah, with aeronautics, we frankly, we can't keep up. And so we thought we'd have 8 or 10 students this first year, and we thought we'd have that kind of growth trajectory. But because our program director and the faculty that CJ Will has kind of surrounded himself with, And again, frankly, it just speaks to the great need, the great demand for pilots in every way. And so, as we've talked about before, Quintin, a student can come and major in as a pilot, can go the commercial aviation track, go a military aviation track, and a missionary aviation track. And so, most of our students initially are going to be commercial and military because missionary pilots tend to be a little bit older because they have generally, like pastors. The average age in a seminary, just as an example, the average age in a seminary is about 35. That's because most pastors go do some other job and they feel this call to ministry, and then they go back and say, hey, I want to really serve the Lord in a different way. And I think that will also happen with missionary pilots. Those who will have gone and done other things will realize that, they could use their skills to serve God and to serve the world as missionary pilots. So we are trying to figure out the best way for us to continue our aviation growth in a responsible way. And so, I anticipate that we'd have 30 new students every year. Right now we're flying out of Summerville Airport. Probably eventually we'd fly out of both Summerville and Berkeley County airports just to make sure we have the capacity to do that. And so, it's a very exciting development, and we look forward to seeing what the Lord's going to do, down the road, or as they would say, down the runway.
Exactly right. And what's that capacity right now for this?
Yeah, I think we're probably at capacity right now for the first year because we have just over 30 who are flying right now. Next year we'll double that, so there'll be about 60. And the way these programs work is, as of this summer, as I understand it, we'll, Lord willing, we will have met the gates to be FAA. It's called Part 141 certified, which means that the students who graduate from our program, they will be able to go directly to the regional airlines to fly with only 1,000 hours. Whereas if they graduate from a non-collegiate program, which is not Part 141 in FAA regulations, they have to have 1,500 hours. And so, what it speaks to is the quality of our program, the quality of training professional pilots. And so this isn't just learning how to fly, it's learning how to be a professional pilot. It's learning decision making. And one of the great benefits of being at Charleston Southern, not only do you have the benefit of being in, relatively small classes with great professors in every discipline, but you also have the benefit, if you're going to be a pilot, to be trained by retired military aviators who understand quick decision making, effective decision making. And so we will have 18, 19, 20-year-olds who next year will be some of our own flight instructors because they will have been trained so well by our faculty and staff. And so it's a very exciting program, and sometime we'd love to have you talk to our aeronautics director, talk to even some of our student pilots. I think you'll be blown away by their maturity, by their ambition in a good way, by their ability to grasp things quickly. And I think any of us, after having a brief conversation with these students, would have no problem getting in an airplane with any of them. And so it's very exciting.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And how do you, as Charleston Southern University, keep up with this aeronautic growth with smart growth?
Yeah, it's a great question because just aeronautics. When you have a good and growing program, which is needed by society, which this one by definition is, and the same model would apply to any other program. But just some of the challenges, good ones that we face are. I'll just kind of do a series of questions. And so right now we're trying to find on our campus the best place to put an aeronautics simulation lab. And so, if any of your listeners have an interest in aeronautics or aviation and would want to help us, build this aeronautics facility, this laboratory for simulation, That would be great. So where do we put the simulation laboratory? Do we continue to contract out our airplanes and the flight instruction to a local high-quality aviation company? We work with Craft Aviation, which last year was named the number one new company in our region, which is pretty incredible. And so, do we build our own hangar? If we build our own hangar, where do we build it? Because there's great merit for an airport, say at either Somerville or Berkeley Airport, just to give a couple of examples, where if either of those become the place where we establish our base, our hub, if you will, that drives commerce, it drives revenue, it drives excitement to these airports, to the respective counties in which they reside. At what point do we consider buying our own airplanes or leasing our own airplanes? And if so, what about maintenance? All those kinds of things. So speaking of which, in the fall, talking about responsible growth, because we really do want to meet. We're in a great place for aeronautics and aviation. Again, with Boeing, we're in the kind of living in the shadow of Boeing here. But we're starting 2 new programs, undergraduate programs in the fall. One is aviation management, and so someone who would want to be involved in the aviation, world without necessarily being a pilot, they're going to be able to do that. And also, we're starting aviation maintenance management. And so, let's say somebody gets out of high school, they like to work with their hands. They go to Trident Tech with that phenomenal aeronautical training facility they have over there. We love Trident Tech, and so that young person then goes to work, say, for Boeing or some other company after having gotten world-class training at Trident Tech. But then let's say they get to their mid-20s or early 30s and go, maybe I want to get into management somehow. And it looks like if I do so, I'm going to need a bachelor's degree, to put myself at least in the running for some kind of management.
Right.
They have a skill set that they need to get better at. And so that really is what we're doing with these 2 programs, on aviation management and aviation maintenance management, to give opportunities to those students so they can advance their careers. And so it's just one example of many at Charleston Southern that we're trying to be nimble, we're trying to be effective and efficient, and trying to find out what the needs are in our community, and then how can we meet them. And so we do that in every kind of way. Aeronautics just is the most recent and the coolest, I would say.
And with those programs, Dr. Costin, how many people do you expect to be enrolled in those particular programs in the next 4 years?
Yeah, I would think well over 100, 150, and I would imagine in all those programs. But we're kind of setting our target 100, 120. Who will be flying or in some capacity, during the period. We've had really extraordinary in this first crop of students. We had 100% pass rate on the first time for the FAA exam. That's just unheard of, but again, it speaks to who Charleston Southern is. It speaks to the program. It speaks to the importance of the program. It also speaks to the faculty and staff who are themselves professional pilots and aviators, and they're training up the next generation. So we'll see what happens, but 100, 120 flying, and Lord willing, a good number in those other 2 programs as well. And we're just going to see what happens. If it looks like the Lord's calling us to begin graduate programs in these areas, then we'll do that as well. But I should just say,
yes, sir,
we're not even finished with the first year yet.
Right.
We're already talking, this kind of growth. Looking forward to what happens next.
Yes, sir. And let me ask you this too, Dr. Costin. Where are these people coming from regionally?
All over the place. Yeah. Just to give an example, last week I was in our dining facility. Now, I'm a former, as you know, former Air Force guy, so I call it the Chow Hall, but for these purposes, I'll be fancy and call it the dining facility. I was in the dining facility, and I saw a student, a freshman, who was wearing a sweatshirt from another college in the state, another private institution. And I said, "Hey, so tell me about this college." No, I'm kind of saying, "Hey, you need new clothing, right?" tell me about this college, because I'm the president of the college, and I love them to death and all that. So I'm just kind of giving them a hard time. I said, "Tell me about this college, and how did you get to Charleston Southern?" He said, I had a full ride, and he named a sport that he was going to play at this college. I had a full ride to play this sport, but as soon as I found out that Charleston Southern had an aeronautics program, because he said, I know I wanted to be a pilot, I gave up the sport and came to Charleston Southern so that I could, kind of live my dream to be a professional pilot at this kind of school. So they come from all over the Southeast at this point. There really aren't very many colleges in the country, frankly, who offer this kind of program. And so, a lot of people from South Carolina and a good number from the region. And that will increase. As again, we're just in our first year. We haven't even finished our first year. So we're in the process now. And as the reputation of the program grows, not only by word of mouth, but reputation will begin to point people in this direction even more.
Speaking of which, how many new and entering freshmen have been awarded an academic scholarship since you've actually taken office?
Well, almost 100% of students who show up here get some kind of financial aid. And so I don't know the exact number of students off the top of my head, but nearly every student gets some kind of institutional aid that comes from our general scholarship fund, or we have a number of endowed scholarships that people, because they're passionate about the university and passionate about a discipline. So maybe somebody whose grandmother was a nurse, they in honor of their grandmother, they start a nursing scholarship, and so that scholarship, and I could name, not off the top of my head, but I could name a number. In the hundreds of these kinds of scholarships. And so it's a bunch. I'll just say that, Quintin. I don't know the exact number, but it's a bunch.
And you talked earlier, Dr. Costin, about enrollment. How do you compare that from, say, 4 years ago when you came into office?
Yeah, there are two kind of ways that we look at enrollment. And one way is, what is total enrollment? And the other way is what's new student enrollment. And so Charleston Southern's high water mark of new students probably happened in 2016 for a number of reasons. We had a winning football, nationally recognized winning football team, and let's face it, athletics, as our athletic director says, athletics isn't the most important thing on the campus, but it's an important thing on the campus. So these last from 2016 in all of higher education, there began to be a little bit of a decline. And so from 2016 to about 2018, when I started, we'd reached kind of a lower point, which wasn't low. It was about what we would expected before the high water mark of 2016. And so we have this past semester in the fall, even during the pandemic, we probably had 75, 80, maybe 100 students more than we had budgeted for, that we thought would show up. They just kept coming because of the great work, even during a pandemic, of our enrollment staff and our new leadership. And so just as an example, for this coming fall, we have about 150 more deposits than we did even a year ago. And so when you get to the point that a student, makes a deposit, what they're saying is, there's a really good chance that I'm coming. So we are excited about that. And what we find, and this is true for every university, what we find is that if we can get a student and their parents, but mainly a student, to come visit the campus and just sort of sense, let me just get a feel for the campus. Let me get a feel for the professors. Let me get a feel for the way it looks. And as we, genuinely believe, and we see this all the time, if a student can get to the campus and experience God speaking to them, because sometimes God just gives them a sense that, this really is the place that you need to be. So what we find is that when a student visits campus, there's greater than a 60% chance that they're going to enroll at Charleston Southern. And if they don't visit campus, there's less than a 30% chance that they're going to. Now, many of them still do, but it just gives you a sense of the kinds of things that we're doing. We're increasing campus visits because we really do want more and more students to experience what it feels like to be on our campus. And then we just pray that the Lord will move on their hearts and they will decide that Charleston Southern is the place for them. And so that's what we're doing, and looking forward to seeing how things progress from here.
And hopefully they'll go by and see our my favorite landmark, which is Lightsey Chapel. But let me ask you, the enrollment. How many were there people of color in that enrollment?
Yeah, Charleston Southern has about 37%. It depends on the year, but let's say for the sake of this discussion, about 35% of our student body are people of color, and about 25% are African American. And so, you compare that to a couple of local colleges, it's significantly more. And so in the state, it is fair to say that within the state of South Carolina, Charleston Southern is one of the top 3 or 4, most diverse, all things considered, most diverse campuses, in the state, really of public or private. I'll just point to our first graduating class, our Doctor of Education and Leadership graduating class. About half of that class of 24, about half were African American. And so, when we think about what is Charleston Southern doing to meet the needs of our community, to give people of every background, whatever it may be, that we can be the place for them to sort of equip themselves to advance their careers. And so we feel like a good part of the reason that we're here in the Low Country is to do exactly that. And so relative to most every other college, probably in the state, certainly in the Low Country, four-year college anyway, we are more representative of our community than the average university.
How do you get from 35% to say 75% of African American enrollment in the next 4 years?
Yeah, that's probably hard to do because a lot of what we do is, we try to reflect our community, and so I think the percentage of African Americans in our community is not 75%, right? It's going to be probably 30-35%, somewhere in that neighborhood. And so I think relative to what the numbers would be nationally, we're in a really good place as far as how we might reflect our community in that way. But if you can think of ideas, Quintin, trust me, we are we're always trying to think of ways to do exactly that. And so if you have good ideas, we're all ears.
I also know that the college obviously wants to retain and recruit and graduate a greater number of underrepresented minority and first-generation students. How many minority and first-generation students have actually you've been able to retain in the past 3 years?
Yeah, our as you probably know from reading our strategic plan, we have 3 wildly important goals: enrollment, retention, and graduation rates. And so our retention rate in the last year, overall has jumped up about 3%. And that's something that we're always trying to work on. And so we have a goal to get to about a 7% increase. And then when we get to that watermark, we'll try to raise it even higher. Ultimately, we'd love to be in the 75 to 80% range of every category. What we find is that the challenge often is financial, and so a student who is able to get the grades to be accepted to Charleston Southern, and they come to Charleston Southern, and we have put into place a number of for all students a number of retention avenues. And so let's say that the high school that they came from wasn't as maybe academically rigorous as they might need it to have been to succeed at Charleston Southern. Then we have a number of processes and people whose job is to sort of step in, and it's what we call intrusive advising. We want to make sure that every student understands. Many of our students are first generation students, which simply means, they can't necessarily go home and ask their parents or their grandparents, hey, how do you get through college? Because they've not done it. So we pay really close attention to those students, and so we have what we call a bridge program, and it's based on how a student scores, or what their scores are coming in, and so we do the best we can both in English and in math to make sure they have every possible opportunity to succeed. And so that's really what we're all about, is increasing services to students in ways that will allow every student the opportunity to succeed. And the first thing I say to students and parents on the first day in our orientation, what I tell them is this: like it or not, college is harder than high school. And so, students, 4.0 students sometimes have difficulty, and 2.5 students sometimes have difficulty, and it takes a year or so to figure college out. But most of those students then, once they do, and they really get a picture of what a college education can do for them, then they, are on the right path.
Speaking of increase, Dr. Costin, how much has the university contributed to the state's economy annually?
Yeah, I haven't seen the latest economic impact study, but so I don't have that number off the top of my head, Quintin. I can certainly get that to you, but if you consider that the university through this university comes about $80 million a year. That's just the money that comes to and through the university. And so, given that we employ, about 500 full-time employees, given that we bring, there are 3,400, give or take, students who are here, out, not just on the campus, because one of the reasons they come to Charleston Southern is because of Charleston. And so they're all over the place, and their parents come to visit them. And so they often are spending their parents' money or their grandparents' money. And so I don't know what the formula is exactly, but it's some multiple of $80 million that on an annual basis that the university puts into the community.
And in Charleston County per se, the university has supported one out of how many jobs?
I don't know how many jobs are in Charleston or Charleston County itself, all told. But again, we're one of the largest employers in the region, and so I don't know how that ratio compares with what the numbers are in Charleston and Charleston County, but it is significant. And I would just say on that point, that's why the Charleston Southern has always had a seat at the table in the business community, with the Charleston Regional Development Alliance, with the Chamber of Commerce. That's why we sit at those tables. So we can remind people that we are one of the largest and most impactful employers in the region, but also because we want them to know that the job that we do is to equip our graduates to go and work in all of those kinds of companies, and so whether it's healthcare, which is a big thing for Charleston Southern, as you know, whether it's STEM and other fields, whether it's education, we graduate a lot of teachers every year, and I don't have to tell you, and you know very well the shortage of teachers that there are, and how hard it is to keep teachers, and how important teachers are, and so we contribute in all kinds of ways. And that's why we just want everyone to know at those tables that our job is to support them and their jobs. That's how we talked about earlier. Not just are we equipping students with how to think and solve problems and articulate and all that, but we're also graduating men and women of character, so they can go and be ethical employees in all of these companies, and at some point, we, Lord willing, our graduates will be running these companies. There are many who already are running companies, locally, and we're just so excited about the impact that we can continue to have for generations to come.
Speaking of which, how have you capitalized on new facilities and STEM and health professions to develop new high-demand academic programs that support state and national workforce needs?
Yeah, what a great question, Quintin. Thanks for asking that one, because that's those are two things that we have done with great significance. And so I'll speak to the first one first, healthcare. A decade or so ago, maybe a dozen years ago, we expanded our College of Nursing and doubled the number of students in that College of Nursing. So it's our largest major, and it's our largest major sort of on purpose, because we do see this great need. As Quintin, you're a young man, but one day you'll be older, and you will need health care. And with the number of people who are coming to Charleston and this region, and the growth trajectory that's happening, and as people, because our life expectancy is going to get greater. COVID brought it down a little bit, but we'll get back to where it continues to increase with advances in medical care and all kinds of other things. And so we expanded our College of Nursing a dozen years or so ago. We created this physician assistant studies program. So we've now graduated 3 classes in the physician assistant studies program. We're starting, as I mentioned earlier, we're starting this physical therapy doctoral program. Our first of 48, our first class shows up the end of May, and we've built facilities for each of these programs so that and when people come and tour our facilities. And I'm being as modest as possible here, because it certainly isn't about me. But they are blown away by the quality of the facility. When accreditors come, when potential donors come, when physicians and other healthcare providers come, and look at our facilities, our healthcare simulation lab. We have a cadaver lab. This new physical therapy program building. Quintin, maybe sometime you could do one of your programs and talk to our College of Nursing, our physician assistant program director, our physical therapy program director. We'd also throw in there, we have a great program in public health, and so we have kinesiology and athletic training. All kinds of things that are happening on the campus that are very, very exciting, because we do see the need to expand our offerings, to equip our community, so that when you're old and gray, Quintin, you'll be well taken care of.
Yes, indeed.
That's healthcare. The other thing you mentioned was STEM, and so we started this engineering program because of that very reason, so that students could come to Charleston Southern, have the benefit of being on this campus under the tutelage of professors who are who love the Lord and want to serve Him, and their service to Him is by training up young men and women to be really high quality engineers. And so our engineering program really is just formally it's in its second year, but we are always looking for ways to expand. And so I can't tell you for certain what program we're going to add next. It'll be something that is needed for the community. I talked before about our cybersecurity program, which was one of the original 14 accredited by ABAT. This just happened, since I've been here. Our computer science program, and so all kinds of things that we look at. I could talk about applied math, which is a significant major. I could talk about all of the new. When we finish out this new building that's being constructed now, we're going to have a cell genetics laboratory in there, and these programs to expand our opportunities to offer classes in chemistry and biology in those labs, because we're feeding not just our own healthcare academic programs. We're also feeding, preparing students to go to a veterinary school and medical school, and to become researchers at the Ph.D. level. So that's one of the many things we're excited about as far as STEM and healthcare.
How do you increase the value of a Charleston Southern University degree, resulting in an increase in net tuition, obviously revenue?
Yes, Quintin, this is the question of the ages. And so this is the question on every college president's mind. And, let's face it, these are challenging days for everyone. So I'm told that today there will be an announcement, from our federal government that inflation is going to be about 8%. Okay, that affects everybody. 8% inflation affects parents and students who are looking at the value of a college education. And so part of what we do is we expand our program offerings as best we can. But what we also do our very best to do is keep costs low, so that, especially in a high inflationary period like we're in today, so that parents and students can still afford a college education. So even though inflation is going to be about 8%, our tuition will only increase this next year about 2.7%. Well, so the challenge, quite frankly, is that if 8% inflation impacts parents and students considering coming to Charleston Southern, well, 8% inflation also impacts our faculty and staff, right? So the people that really are the key to the university are those who are in front of students all the time. So how do we balance this? And so this is probably, for the next 2, 3, 4 years, maybe, this is going to be the challenge that every college president faces. How do you keep costs low so that students can afford to come and get an education? But at the same time, how do you increase the rate of pay for those who need it, so they can afford, because groceries are higher, gas is higher, everything's higher. So how do you do that? So this really is really the question of the ages for us today. And it's you can only keep costs so low for so long, and then you really have to figure out ways to expand program offerings so that you increase net revenue that way. And so this is what we think about all the time, Quintin. And I appreciate you asking the question. And so when you pray for Charleston Southern, and if I happen to make my way onto your prayer list, you can pray for that. That God would move in that way. And along the way, certainly, we are in the very beginning stages of a capital fundraising campaign, and looking at that. But there are ways that your listeners, your viewers, can contribute to the well-being of students and faculty. If they have an interest in a particular academic program, want to start a scholarship, want to endow an academic professorship, all kinds of ways that, perhaps the philanthropy of those in your very influential sphere of influence, might impact the life of a student. That's what I tell people. Our donors, what I say to them often, I say, the best thing that you can do is just come to campus sometime and sit on a bench and watch students walk by. And you just say, how could I help that one and that one and that one? And it will really motivate you to think about the legacy that you're leaving, because you're investing in the life and career and family of another person who might not otherwise have that opportunity without the generosity of those who give.
And I have two more questions for you, Dr. Costin. In what way are you actually recruiting and retaining and supporting outstanding faculty committed to teaching excellence at Charleston Southern University?
Yeah, what we find, Quintin, is that Charleston Southern has a very particular draw for faculty members. You know, as you know, because you've spoken to every person on the planet, which is why I'm always so impressed with you, Quintin. I don't know how you do it, but you're an impressive. God, that's right. God put you in front of people, and it's incredibly impressive. And I don't know what you thought you'd be doing when you were in high school, but it might not have been this, right? I mean, it just happened, and God made it happen, and you're good at it. So when it comes to faculty, you know, there are sort of two kinds of universities, right? There are universities that are primarily research that do teaching, and there are universities that are primarily teaching that do some research, right? And so we are primarily a teaching institution. Now we want our faculty to do research because they need to stay at the top of their game and in their profession and all of that, and so it's good for students, right? But primarily, faculty are interested in Charleston Southern for 3 or 4 really good reasons. And sometimes people ask me, you know, what are the 3 things you love best about Charleston Southern University? And I say it's really 3 words: Charleston Southern University. All right, all 3 of those things are pretty cool. So if you're looking for a faculty position, and you can move to Charleston, you know, you're like, okay, one of the top cities in the country. I think I'd like to be there. The second thing that really people focus on is the kind of university that CSU is: a decidedly, unapologetically Christian university who serves every kind of student, right? And so they know that they can come here and they can, they can be a person of faith. They can, consistent with our vision statement of integrating faith and learning, leading, and serving, they can actually do that. Now, many of them are, every professor here is a Christian, and they may have come up through a secular school and not have been allowed to talk about their faith. And when they come to Charleston Southern, we want to make sure they're a good fit. We want to make sure they understand who we are. We want to understand who they are, so that when they get here, they don't feel like they've landed at a place that they weren't aware of. So they come mostly so they can be really good teachers at a Christian university with small class sizes, that they can get to know their students really, really well, and live in a great location, and do that for a career. And so that really, those are our main draws, are those things, because they really get to be who they were born to be. And they can, many of our faculty do a whole lot of research and publish and all kinds of things, and so there's no limitation on that. But the ability to have the no kidding real professor, not a graduate assistant, none of that happens here. It's always the professor who's teaching the class. That really is what draws them here, and that's what makes Charleston Southern a really special place.
How has the university, Dr. Costin, provided ongoing teaching, learning, research, and service opportunities to prepare students, faculty, and staff to address obviously diversity, inclusion, and equity issues in the disciplinary and interdisciplinary fields?
Yes, great question. We have, our university. We do have a diversity officer, who views diversity like we view everything else, through the lens of Scripture. And so, you would be familiar, Quintin, with 1 Corinthians 12, when the Apostle Paul talks about the church. He speaks of it sort of as body parts. Some people are eyes, some people are ears, some people are noses, and so we all come, to the table from that perspective. And so what we want is everybody to be represented at the table, because all of us are made in the image of God. And so from a university perspective, that's kind of our starting point. And then a number of individual academic units have their own, spin on that, their own take on that, to make sure that, as best we can, we want our faculty and staff to mirror the diversity of our student body. And so, that really is our aim. That's where we're headed. It's what we want to see happen, because that's what's best for students as well. If you go through your entire college experience, and you never have a professor who looks like you, for instance, and that's a little harder than if you have somebody who looks like you, has the same background, has the same experience as you, because you can say, okay, if he or she can do it, then so can I. And so we're just, like everybody else, we want to make sure that the right people are at the table, and everybody at the table has a voice, and that voice is meaningful and biblical, and is a voice that lifts everybody up. And so that's kind of our approach and our perspective.
Increase the 4-year graduation rate at Charleston Southern University through a systematic approach.
Yeah. So, again, we have these 3 wildly important goals. And so we have increased retention rates. We have increased graduation rates. And it's a multifaceted challenge, because in some cases, it's academic preparation when a student gets here. And again, we don't lower the standard. We try to raise a student up to the standard. And sometimes there's what I would call collateral damage. So if you get a certain scholarship or a grant that requires a student to maintain a certain GPA, and that student, as they're figuring out college, dips below that certain GPA at the end of the first year, they might lose that state grant or scholarship that they got. So it becomes a kind of a vicious cycle, if you will. So what we are looking at very strongly is how do we start a program of what I'm calling student success coaches. Students who, and because based on the data coming in, we have a pretty good sense based on historical data. If you have a certain GPA or a certain test score, or that other factors that will be engaged in that, we would have a sense based on those who have come before you, how well you might do. And so based on the data, we are looking at how then do we focus on those students who from the very beginning who without some help, might not find their way. So our freshman seminar, for instance, this past year, we began to focus even more on, how to succeed in college. Things like study habits, and doing your homework, and taking advantage of resources that you might not have needed in high school, like a writing lab or a math lab, because as I said to you earlier, the first thing I tell students and parents on day one is college is harder than high school. How do you do that? And so a really good example on our campus, believe it or not, Quintin, happens in our athletic department, because our athletic department, for the first time in the history of Charleston Southern that we know of, the average GPA in our athletic department of our students was a greater than a 3.0. That didn't happen by accident. It happened because the athletic department does what I referred to earlier as intrusive advising. It doesn't let students make excuses or get away with excuses. It's having a coach or an academic advisor, having a good relationship with other academic advisors on campus, not letting a student miss class, and making sure they understand that, if you think you can miss class and do okay in life, then, that might work at college. It probably doesn't for most, because we have requirements. You can't miss but so many classes anyway. But if you show up for work late, your boss is not going to pat you on the back and go, "Oh, that's okay." So you're teaching students these skills. It might have been the case that their mom or dad or grandma or grandpa or guardian or whomever, big brother, got them up out of bed and made sure they got to school. Well, when you come to college, nobody does that for you. So you got to get yourself out of bed. You got to get yourself to class. You got to do your own homework. You got to write your own papers. You got to, figure it out. And our job is to have as many systems, programs, processes, the right people in place, given our resources, to do that for as many people as possible. And so, we've changed some of our own policies, for instance. And so, just one example. So, when I arrived, to keep an institutional scholarship, a scholarship that Charleston Southern gave you, you had to maintain a 2.5 GPA to keep that scholarship, even though to stay in school, you only needed to keep a 2.0, which is pretty standard. So we said, why do we have this difference? Why don't we just make keeping a scholarship? Because what our interest really is in helping every student graduate. It's not, it's nothing more than that, help them graduate. And many of our students, they work multiple jobs, they support their families, and so not every student has the same life situation. And so we wanted to make it as easy as possible, given a student's financial and family situation to get through. So we eliminated that 2.5 requirement. And so now, to keep the scholarship, you don't have to have a higher standard. You just have to have the same standard that it would be to stay in school. And we do that because we understand that students, not every student has a luxury of having their college paid for by somebody else. Many of them, are duking it out, not getting much sleep, making things happen because they understand the value of a college education, not just in the process of the 4 years, but what it can do for them when they graduate and spend the rest of their lives. So when I talk about, having a student finding their own purpose, what we say to them is that where you go to college is the second most important decision you're going to make. The first most important decision you ever make is, your relationship with Jesus Christ, right? I mean, do you have a relationship with God or do you not? That's number one. But number two, especially chronologically for most students, is where you're going to go to college, because it's in college where the Lord begins to work in your life and helps you to figure out the next, 70 years of your life. And so from college, you also are probably going to meet the person you might get married to, and you're going to figure out what the rest of your life is going to look like in terms of your profession. Now, you might not end your professional life in the same career you started, but you'll learn the skills necessary to succeed in any career fields at Charleston Southern. So that's really what we're about, is helping them to look at not just what's right in front of them, but let's look, 50, 60, 70 years down the road. I officiated a wedding on Sunday afternoon, and anytime I do premarital counseling with a couple, and even in the wedding, I will just point out to the couple that, the wedding is important, but the wedding only takes about 30 minutes. What we're really interested in is the marriage, because we want the marriage to last 50, 60, 70 years. And the same thing with college. It's not the college experience that is the most important. It is important because of what it does. It's what comes after that. And our job is to prepare you during college to succeed in every significant way down the road, in your family life, in your church life, in your social life, relational life, emotional life, spiritual life, professional life, all of that. That's what we're about at Charleston Southern.
And I want to expand on that later in fall when I come back to do an interview with you. But thank you so much for your time again here on Quintin's Close-Ups. It's so good to see you, and I hope to be up the road there soon to see you in person.
Great, Quintin. We love it when you come to campus. Look forward to seeing you soon. God bless you, Quintin. Always good to see you.
Likewise.